What is going on, XYZers? What's the dealio, XYZers? What's the haps? What did we say earlier? Gang, or whatever it is, XYZers. Now we are back with our second formal episode.
Yep.
We're looking at chapter 38, right?
Yep.
And 38. This is going to be an interesting one. I think the title for this that I put in the show notes was Cruddy on all fronts.
Cruddy.
Does Cruddy? Do y'all know what Cruddy means?
Like trifling?
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
I think we say trifling. What do y'all say? Trifling?
Trifling.
Okay, trifling.
Yeah. But Cruddy was when I was like in high school.
I don't know if I ever went through a phase of saying Cruddy ever. I've heard it, but I never actually said it.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, at least we sort of all understood what it meant. So.
Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, Cruddy on all fronts. So it's a little divergence from Joseph's story, right?
Yep.
And then in 39, we'll pick back up full force with Joseph and what's going on with him down in Egypt. But it's a little detour that's taken as we talk about what's going on in chapter 38. Who's seen The Color Purple?
I haven't.
Oh my gosh.
Have not.
I've
seen clips.
Serious?
Yeah.
We're not black enough.
Yeah, I would say take the card. Take the black card. No.
So y'all don't know any of the classic Color Purple sayings?
I might know the sayings, but that doesn't mean I watched the movie.
All my life I had.
Yeah, I know that.
I know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna rain on your head.
He looks so disappointed.
Right. I thought I had him conflated. I thought that The Help was The Color Purple. So when people were talking to me about it, I was like, oh yeah, I know, I've watched it. Oh my gosh, the pie, that was my favorite scene. And then they were like, wrong movie. I was like, okay, just don't mind me. Act like I didn't say that.
That's crazy. I'm not that bad. Then I did watch The Help also.
Right.
Color Purple is too long.
What? Color Purple is a classic.
I might watch the new one that they're making.
Right.
Or that they made.
Yeah.
I might watch that.
And that's one of the things. So a couple of things that made me bring up The Color Purple, because you all haven't seen it. I don't know if you're going to see it when it's coming out soon. But it is really about, and I'm upset. Is it Walker? It might be Alice Walker who wrote the book, and that got adapted into a play. But it's really about the plight of the women in that era, right? During that time. And it's not so much even racism in that movie, even even though it is, you can see it and there are episodes, but it was really about treatment within family of women. And so the reason I bring that up is as we go through chapter 38 of Genesis today, I think that you'll see some things that say, wow, how were the women in this chapter treated?
Yeah.
And ultimately it'll make you say, okay, who's right and who's wrong? Yeah. Right. And then you have to say, well, this is like real life. Yeah. So it's not always cut and dry. Right. So y'all ruined my segue because I'm an old dude and y'all are like young hip people who never saw The Color Purple. Yeah, it came out.
I think we're unhip because we haven't seen it. I think the majority of people of our race have seen it. Because my husband has seen it. He's like, why haven't you watched it? We need to watch it. And I'm like, I don't know why I would want to watch it.
Shout out to Marcus. Yes.
Well, shout out to him, yes. I still have not watched it with him, though.
Oh, man. So we are going to look at Tamar, Judah and Tamar.
Let's start with 1 through 11.
1 through 11.
All right.
So I'll read the first.
Okay.
The first 11 verses. Genesis chapter 38, verse 1. And it reads as follows. It says, it happened at the time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adullamite whose name was Hirah. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He took her and went into her. And she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. Yet again she bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. Judah was in Kezeb when she bore him. Verse 6. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, go in to your brother's wife, and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her, and raise up offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, so whenever he went into his brother's wife, he would waste the semen on the ground so as not to give offspring to his brother. And what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also. Verse 11. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till Shelah, my son, grows up, for he feared that he would die like his brothers. So Tamar went and remained in her father's house. Oh, man. So we are quickly introduced to several persons. Yeah. Which of the people in these first 11 verses stands out to you guys?
So I think, just going back a little bit, we talked about how this is just like a shift from the Joseph story.
Yes.
So the setting here is this immediately after they have sold their brother, and now we're like, okay, he left and he's like, I'm leaving and I'm gonna go, do my own thing. Mm-hmm. Is that where we are, or do we not know how far off this is from his Joseph story?
Yeah, so we don't know exactly how far, because there's no real time markers to say. But what we do say, and the wording is done the way it is on purpose, right? So it happened at that time, or now, or at this moment, right? Type of thing. So it's sort of showing there's a progression in time, and there is going to be, the expectation is that there's some overlap between what's going on with Joseph and what's happening with his brother Judah. Yeah. But we don't know exactly how long. Was it late in Joseph's story? Was it early in Joseph's story? Yeah. And there have been a lot that I've read that talks about why was this put here? And most commentaries that I read say that this chapter was put here because it was the best place to show something that the author Moses wanted to show about Judah.
Yeah, okay. And I think too, from the Bible reference, it gives a little context, of why this was thrown there, just from their perspective. It says the events in chapter 38 likely take place during the time Joseph was a slave in Egypt, and sometime before he reunited with his brothers. After this passage, we will return to the focus of Joseph. So, when Joseph is reunited with his brothers, they're coming not on the best of occasions. Like, there's a famine going on, like they're struggling. And I think it's interesting that the story of Judah is put here, showing the things going on with him and his family, and the turmoil and the different struggles going on. Mm-hmm. I think it kind of characterized, and I'm not sure, I haven't gone too far, but I'm interested to see if we get the characterization of multiple brothers to show how they struggle before they reunite with Joseph, and to see if there's something that goes on that makes all of this make sense.
Yeah.
I don't think we do.
I think that we've already seen some.
Yeah.
We've seen some character, right? When you look at Reuben, we talked about this last time, what happened with Reuben and one of the mothers of Jacob, sons, right? Mm-hmm. Where he went into her and he wasn't supposed to. The son sleeping with the father's wife, right? Yeah. So that gives us a little insight into Reuben. But then also, I think we talked about this last time, that we looked at when Dinah, their sister, was going on with, and what was going on with the folks, with Shechem and the king, and how they behaved and responded, and then how Jacob talked to them, right? Mm-hmm. So you figure Reuben, Simeon, and I'm drawing a blank on the third, but they were like the three oldest. So by the time now we're talking about Judah. So it's like there's this progression, and we get to see some of what's going on with each of them. Okay. So
So from there, we basically go into he turns aside to this group of people that they aren't necessarily supposed to be associated with, and marries one of them, or not marries, but whatever you call it at this time. I guess it's still marries. Has children with this person. And one thing that kept coming up in different commentaries is that they were told multiple times not to marry into this group of people, but it keeps happening that people are still doing it. So I thought that was interesting.
It is. And it's interesting because one, it talks about him going down, talks about him turning aside. So when you start to think of the connection between what we just read in chapter 37 and what's going on in chapter 38, I've got two brothers who have now been separated from their families, one voluntarily and one involuntarily. So you start to think about why is this here, and you wonder if there are ties. You can see ties, and I think we'll see some more as we go through. Yeah. But he turned aside, which is interesting, and married a Canaanite.
Yeah.
So, and before that, right, Isaac wanted Esau. He wanted Jacob to marry, and Esau to marry within, right, their cousins or whatever, which wasn't a problem at that time. And Esau outright rebelled and married a Canaanite. When you go back and you read chapter 36 of Genesis, he was like, "I'm just going to be the rebellious one, and I'm going to marry a Canaanite, even though you really don't want me to." So.
And I think later on, it becomes an actual law for them not to, right? In Deuteronomy, they're told specifically not to intermarry with these people. So for some reason, God is like, leave these people alone.
Right.
But something is drawing them to still continue. And maybe big picture, we get told that later on that this is part of, these people end up being part of the genealogy of Jesus, right? So it's a little confusing because we're told not to intermarry with them, but then they get added to that lineup.
But so is Rahab, isn't she? She's part of that line as well, and she definitely wasn't a member of Israel.
Yeah.
So it's not out of the norm for that to happen.
Yeah.
But what I think we should be looking at, one thing to sort of try and pay attention to, and I think we sort of alluded to this last time in chapter 37, just sort of like this man who seems to almost come out of nowhere, right? I think what we see happening is God is orchestrating things, and it's not that he's coming down on a mountain and speaking to, Moses directly, or walking in the cool of the day with Adam, or coming up to Abram, telling him to go somewhere. He's not interacting that directly, but he's still in control. And even when people are just being people, God is still working things out to get what he wants to get accomplished, which goes back to what you were saying, Jasmine. I get to 50-20, and I see that verse, which you meant for evil. Right?
Yeah.
So cool. We turned aside. Judah's wife. Do we hear anything about his wife?
She named all these kids, and I didn't notice that until you said, and she, and I was like, maybe he's trying to tell us something.
Yeah, right.
Hey, picture that.
Yeah. I didn't notice that before,
but also she's not named.
Yeah.
Right? Remember, going back to The Color Purple, she's not called out. Her dad is called out. Now, that could be because she's a Canaanite, but it could also be because of the way that Judah looks at this encounter, because there's no, so I'm going to ask a question. How did Jacob act? And you mentioned this last time when he saw Rachel.
how did he act?
Yeah.
He was happy. He went and asked the father to marry her.
And,
so.
Yep. And you said it was like love at first sight, I think you said last time. For him. Right.
I didn't say anything about her, though.
No, you're right. But and then he was willing to work for her. And this seems like a completely different tact where Judah's just like, okay, yeah, you cool. Come on. And, we married now. Caveman speak club type thing,
Yeah.
So
it seems like the children, like the heirs is the priority. Like have my sons. Okay, I got somebody. Okay, let's have children. Okay, we're gonna keep producing. All right, now marry. Well, we'll see that in a second. But marry my son. Continue his line. Like we just got to continue the line. And I thought that was interesting too, because when she wasn't named, I was like, I'm confused. Who is this she? I'm getting lost.
Yeah, and I like the point that you just brought up because, and you're right. I went through and say he and then she, and she in terms of the naming. But if you look at the progression, it's like Judah's there for Er's birth, names him, firstborn, which you just mentioned, right? But when it comes to Onan, she named him.
Yeah, I see that.
When it comes to Shelah, she named him again. And where was Joseph? I mean, where was Judah?
Yeah,
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah,
he was at Kezeb. He wasn't even there. Right. So I think there's some validity to your point that, and this is part of the custom of the ancient Near East, that firstborns are the most important ones.
Yeah.
Right. They get more of their father's wealth when it comes time for things to be handed out. So even to the point where you start to think of why Onan did what he did, I may be getting a little ahead of what we need to where we are and what we want to talk about. But he was like, go in and what is levirate marriage? Do this levirate marriage thing. And I want to talk about that a little bit. But it was could it be because he was the firstborn?
Yeah.
And I gotta have him have offspring?
Yeah.
I think so.
So, and he picked the wife for doesn't say, I don't know whether he did or not, but there's no focus on the fact that he may have picked a wife for Onan. And we know that he didn't really do one for Shelah because he was too young at that point in time.
Yeah.
So what is this levirate marriage thing?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So levirate marriage, so it was a custom that was codified in law in Deuteronomy. That demands that childless widows be given in marriage to the husband of the late brother. So essentially it's continuing
to the brother of the late husband.
Yes. The brother of the late husband. Like, yeah. No, yeah. So
I was nodding like, that's it.
Yeah.
Opposite.
So it's essentially, let's continue this line. But the thing is, and we'll see that in a minute, where Onan is conflicted is these are not my children. I'm not raising, these won't be mine. I'm not raising my own children. These will be considered my brother's line. So, and he just takes advantage of the situation. But in that, they're not producing, like the brother will never be able to claim those children as his heir, like, to continue his family line.
Yeah.
And it's just the first child, right? If it's a son, or is it all? It's not all the children that he has with her if he were to have multiple. They're just trying to get one son to represent his father, right? That passed.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing that you mentioned was that the way that the levirate marriage was set up, and I think this was Deuteronomy 25, right? Is that the passage area?
Yeah.
Like 5 to 10 or something like that?
Yeah, 25, 5 to 6.
Yep.
So it says to go in and that you are to marry. But Judah didn't say anything about marriage.
Right.
So looking at what happened to him? Pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah. Well, is it straightforward? Because we don't know what the man did. We just know he was evil.
Just know he was evil.
And all the commentaries I was reading and listening to kept saying ER like how it's written in, I guess, is it Hebrew or Greek?
Hebrew.
It's the reverse of it is evil. Like that's what the word spells. So they were thinking that it was a play on words. Like
I didn't think of that. Okay.
So that's what I said. He's evil backwards.
He's evil backwards. Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. And I mean, what does it mean to you, Jasmine, that it was like, just didn't just say that he was killed by it. It says that God killed him because he was evil.
I don't quite know what the evilness could have been from. My speculation about why was taken from Judah was because Judah's intentions for having his son may not have been as pure as they should have been.
I feel like it wouldn't be related to Judah at all.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. I think
go ahead. I was gonna say I think in his own right was just evil. I don't believe that God would kill him because of Judah. Because why not? I mean, I can't say why not kill Judah because God is interesting like that. But at the same time, I don't think in this situation he did that. I think he was just legitimately an evil person.
Yeah.
And probably. And the other thing I was thinking about is there's people that have done evil things up until this point, like Cain and Abel, and God didn't kill Cain. So what could he have been doing that is like, I'm willing to let you be out of here?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird because when you think of things like that, and I was listening to someone this week and they said that I have to look at the actions that God carries out in light of his character. Mm-hmm. So I know that God is just. I know that he's righteous. I know that he is holy. I know that he knows all. I know that he can do all things within his character. I know all of these perfections or attributes, as people call them. So even when I get to this and it doesn't tell me, I just have to say, God's shown me who he is. So for whatever was going on, it must have been bad enough for him to be like, you got to go, buddy.
Yeah.
Because and it's really an open and shut case. So that's but when we get to Onan, we get a little more insight as to why God dealt with him the way he did. So what did God do with Onan?
Took his life. And you know what's so interesting?
What was that?
God took his life, and what I found interesting when I was going and looking at all the brothers, like in the two that God took their lives, I was talking to my grandmother, and I was like, "What in the world?" Their sins are all, all sins are sins. They're all equal.
Yep.
What made God say, "No, that's unacceptable"? This one in particular, this is unacceptable. You're done.
Yeah.
But I was looking at how, like, within the text, Onan didn't want to carry on his brother's line and it not be his children, so he was spilling his semen on the ground when he was having sex with Tamar.
Yep.
And in my mind, I was like, oh, okay, so he's spilling his semen because he doesn't want to produce children that won't be his. But then I read another commentary, and to like really understand why God was so upset. And it talked about how Onan was using her and using the situation because he didn't want the children, but he did want the sex. So in going back to what we were talking about before, how there's a delineation between marriage and having kids, I feel like there is one, but it's not like explicit. So like God, and there's different places in the text that talk about like having sex outside of like your covenant, but then and sex is used to reproduce. So like sex, having children, I kind of like look at those one in the same in this sense. Having children is one thing, and then having children within your marriage is something else. So for him to just want sex with her and not want to produce the children, which is what the sex is for, God, from what I read, they're saying God's like, no, that's not what this is for. You're abusing the right.
Okay. Yeah. And the intention wasn't for him to get another person to have sex with. That's still technically his brother's wife, his late brother. So you're supposed to be fulfilling a duty and you're just not doing it. But it's seeming like you are, right? So he's going in there every day like, I mean, I tried.
Yeah, right.
Did you though?
Right.
And I don't know if I don't know if Tamar ever said anything, because this is not happening one time. This is multiple times. This is every time he did this. Yeah. This is what he did. And she's just like, she's just there. She's just taking it.
And it gets me back. So 2 things. Well, 3 things. 1, shout out to your grandma. She's like the grandma of the podcast.
Yeah.
Right? So shout out to you, grandma.
Yeah, shout out to you, grandma.
Item number 2. I completely agree with what you said, Moyo, because I think that one of the issues wasn't that they were carrying out the deed of, of having sex, but the fact that he was being misleading about his ultimate intentions.
Yeah.
Makes me think when you go to Acts and you remember in Acts, and I don't know why this always happens to me, but I draw a blank on the names. And I shouldn't be.
Is it the ones that were doing the tithing?
Ananias and Sapphira.
Yeah.
And remember how they went in, and so I think it was Barnabas who sold all that he had and bought it to the church. And then Ananias and Sapphira was like, hey, look at what happened with Barnabas. He got some shout outs, some big ups, and people look at him different. So why don't we sell what we have? We're not going to give it all. We're going to make it look like we gave it all.
Yeah.
And then what happened to them?
They got killed.
Yep. Right? You have not lied to me, Peter said. I think that was Peter. He said, you've lied to the Holy Spirit. You've lied to God. And so, and it was even more savage because he's like, yeah, see where you're standing now? Yeah, to Sapphira, your husband was right there and he's been rolled up in the carpet and carried out somewhere. So it makes me think that sometimes that you can think that you are getting one over, but you're really not. Yeah. So don't fake the funk. Don't act like you about something and then not be about it.
God can see you, whether you know whether you think so or not.
Right. And to carry that point just a little further, when we think of elaborate marriage and what Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 10 talks about, it's the next in line brother doesn't have to partake of this.
He can say no.
But what does that mean for the family? That there's some humiliation that the family has to endure. I think the widow is supposed to take the shoe off of the guy and spit in his face or something. So there's some humiliation. So it's not that he had to, he potentially could have just been like, look, Dad, no, I really don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He went in, made it seem like he was about, doing the business, and then was like, nah, I'm really not.
Yeah.
So that to me is like, okay. We get a little more insight as to why God dealt with Onan the way that he did.
Yeah.
And really emphasizes God's character.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And that's the thing, because one thing, and we'll have to look at through the rest of these chapters, but remember early on in this story of Genesis, God has been dealing directly with his people. God's been talking, and I said this earlier, God's been talking to folk. God's been walking with folk. God's been moving folk and telling folk where to go. Abraham, go to this and sacrifice your son. Abraham, you need to do this. This is the covenant. And Abraham's having dreams and seeing stuff and animals cut. But here, you don't really hear it. And even with Jacob, the wrestling that he had to go through. But you haven't really seen God overtly act. Mm-hmm. Except for maybe these 2 cases so far, where he's had to kill people.
Yeah.
Right. So you know he's there and he's working, and so you really got to rely on his character to sort of, in my mind, provide the separation between what you see people do and where God stands in the midst of all of this. Yeah. So that's cool. Shelah. What about Shelah, the youngest?
Just a baby.
Just a baby.
A baby. Yeah. Right now, I mean, we don't know anything about him yet, or even at all. We don't ever really find out anything about him. No. His dad is protecting him.
Yeah.
And not even as like not as the favorite like we discussed with Joseph, just as I've already lost 2, I only have 1 more, let me protect this one.
Right.
Can we go back a little bit?
Yep.
Because Onan, I kept seeing the sin of Onan for like Catholics use that as a way to confess their sins, like if they masturbate, because masturbation is supposed to be a sin, right? Or I guess. And so they use it as the sin of Onan, and this is the passage that people use for that. They also use this passage as the reason to not use birth control.
Right.
And those, it's like, it wasn't really the point. We just talked about how the deception was why it was an issue, versus it wasn't the fact that he was spilling his semen. It wasn't the fact that he was like not, I don't even know how to say it. It wasn't the fact that he was spilling his semen, or it wasn't even masturbation. So I'm not sure why people use that for masturbation. Yeah. So how do people get those connections? Where are they pulling that from?
So one thing that I think happens a lot is that people try and pull scripture out of context to try and make a point. So I think there are other places, just for the whole point of procreation, that you may be able to use to better illustrate God's stance on masturbation, sex out of wedlock, things of that nature. More so than trying to pull it from here, because as you just said, it really doesn't have any, it doesn't have to do with any of that. He wasn't performing acts with himself. He was just lying, basically.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's just one of those things where people come and they want to prove a point so bad, and they take stuff wherever they think it fits to fit their narrative. And that's wrong.
Right.
Right. Because one, you are not being completely true to the text. One. Right. And then 2, you're making it seem like I've got to come up with ways to say I got to come up with alternate ways than what God is using to say what is right and wrong in his eyes, which I think is also detrimental.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I agree. Where do you get it from?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I think there's other places, like just the whole mandate to multiply, right?
Yeah.
That would better fit the correct usages of sex. And then even the covenant of marriage is where valid may not be the right word, but in God's eyes, what sex and where sex should be performed.
Yeah.
Right. So, what about Tamar? How do y'all see Tamar in all of this?
I used to initially with Tamar, I felt bad for her because she wanted. Well, I couldn't get clear on her motives. Essentially, at first, I remember off camera.
Hold up. So take a step back. Okay. Just in what we've read 1 through 11. How do you see Tamar in just those verses? Not her actions.
Her goal is to have a child.
Well, I think in 1 through 11, we don't know much about her yet, right? We just know that she's doing whatever she's told.
Right. Yeah.
So they told her, go back to your father's house. She went back to her father's house. She didn't argue about it. They told her, have a kid with this son because the husband died. She went ahead and did it. Like right now, she's just a submissive woman doing what she's supposed to do because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Do we want to read the next section, or did you have more to say about Tamar?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, and why I opened up with the color purple, because Tamar really doesn't have a voice.
Yeah.
In anything that's going on. You already alluded to it, right? Where did she say anything when Onan was doing what he was doing?
Yeah.
If she had said anything, would anyone have cared?
Yeah.
How sorry, if that's the right word, or concerned is Judah with Tamar?
Yeah.
Because we hear the reason he doesn't want to give Tamar to Shelah right now. One, true, he's probably young, but also he's like not thinking that his kids did anything wrong.
Yeah.
He's looking at her like, you're like a black widow.
Yeah.
And so Tamar is going through it.
Yeah.
Tamar is going through it. And I think that's, to me, that was one of the big points from her standpoint, from her vantage point in those first 11 verses.
Yeah.
All right. So next up, do we want to read Genesis 38, 12 through 23?
Sure. I can read it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, hold on. Let me go back up. Okay. So, verse 12. Okay. In the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. When Judah was confronted, he went up to Timnah.
When Judah was comforted.
Yes.
Oh, comforted. Oh, sorry. Okay, let me go back.
Okay.
When Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers. He and his friend Hirah, the Adullamite. And when Tamar was told her father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, wrapping herself up, and sat at the entrance of Enayim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up, and she had not been given to him in marriage. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. He turned to her at the roadside and said, "Come, let me come into you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, "What will you give to me, that you may come into me?" He answered, "I will send you a young goat from the flock." And she said, "If you give me a pledge until you send it." He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your signet, your cord, and your staff that is in your hand." And he gave them to her, and went into her, and she conceived by him. Then she arose and went away, and taking off her veil, she put on the garments of her widowhood. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite to take back the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. And he asked the men of the place, "Where is the cult prostitute who was at the
Enayim,
at the roadside?" And they said, "No cult prostitute has been here." So he returned to Judah and said, "I have not found her." Also the man of the place said, "No cult prostitute has been here." And Judah replied, "Let her keep the things as her own, or we shall be laughed at. You see, I sent this young goat, and you did not find her." And that's 23.
Yep, that's through 23. Awesome. So, oh man, there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
What do we think about Tamar and what she's doing?
I don't know if it made any sense. Like, okay, the Judah's wife dies. He's, I guess, done mourning, and he's going somewhere to do his sheep shearing stuff or whatever. What does that have to do with her going and placing herself to seem like a prostitute? Like, is that normal for him to get prostitutes? Is it like, what is her thought process? Like, I'm gonna sit here, he's gonna see me and be like, "I want to sleep with you," and then I'm gonna have a kid. Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's true. It's a good point. So sheep shearers, when they did sheep shearing and when they would go up, there was a feast associated with it as well. So it was almost like a party that they would want to do and do some work and all of that. Did anybody pick up why she wanted to go this route?
Because she still hadn't given Shelah,
right?
Or is that how you say it?
Yep, Shelah.
Yeah, as her husband.
Yeah,
and he's old enough.
And
at this point.
He should be old enough at this point. So at this point, he's old enough.
Yeah.
Right. At this point, what's happened with Judah is that Shua's daughter, his wife, has passed. Right. So some of the commentaries I read says that he's more susceptible now.
I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So he's going up. He's going to have this party. He's taking his boy with him, Hirah. And now she I believe that Tamar comes to the realization that what he promised is not going to happen.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that at the end of verse 11, that Judah had said to Tamar, you need to go and to live at your father's house, which was an item of shame for her, because she was no longer welcome in the house that she was married into. And so she had to go back to her father's house. And then on top of that, everybody pick up what she had on, took off, and put back on.
Yeah, her widow's garments.
Her widow's garments.
Yeah. So she's still in this mourning phase until she supposedly is supposed to get this new husband, right?
She needs to continue to, she's not able to remarry.
Yeah.
She's not able to go outside. She's still been betrothed to Shelah, who's never going to, as far as she knows, be given back to her.
Yeah.
So again, when you start to think of Shelah and when you start to think of Tamar and everything that's going on, you still continue to pick up this item that she really didn't have a voice.
Yeah.
As you go through all of this. The other thing that's interesting in the tie, did anybody pick up the tie between the clothes? The tie between the clothes?
The signet. Oh, wait, her clothes.
Her clothes. Because to draw a little comparison and to show the tie, I think the widow's garments at this point are identifying her just as much as Joseph's coat was identifying him. So now they're both tied to being identified. Joseph as this dreamer who's too big for his britches, and now her who's going to be this widow, right, for as long as she lives, unless she takes action. And so just as Joseph's coat was ripped from him before he was put into the pit, that was, again, not of his own doing, right? She is going to voluntarily take off her widow's clothes to go and carry out something that she thinks she needs to do.
Yeah.
So I think there's another tie. And then I think we'll see some more ties as we go through.
Yeah.
So anything else about Tamar that you all pick up there? What you see?
She's either very quick on her feet or she had this master plan like thought out. Cause I don't know. I just don't know. Like we know that she understands the environment she's in. So she can't get remarried. Right. She's attached to somebody she's never going to get.
Yep.
Her livelihood is dependent on a son or a husband, right?
Yes.
And right now she has none.
Neither.
And I'm sure in her father's house, she might be being taken care of to some extent, but you don't give your daughter away to get her back. Yeah. So I think she quick on her feet, because how did she know he wasn't going to have money to pay? How did she know? Like, there's just a lot of, girl, how'd you know?
A lot of stuff going on, right? Yeah. And it just seems to be falling in place.
Yeah. Perfectly for her and her master plan.
Was that your take, Jasmine?
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things that I read, and it's interesting, you guys said she doesn't have a voice. Like, I didn't really have much sympathy for her initially. I didn't get that, like, oh, yeah, they're taking their options and everything away from her. They're just telling her what to do and making her go about it. But, like, one of the commentaries that I read talked about how she felt hopeless, and she felt like because the promise was not fulfilled as of yet, that Judah wasn't going to no one, like you said, no one's going to be able to take care of her, including her father-in-law. Right. And as a result, she derived whatever plan. And it even said that, like, there's no scripture that says that she had, like, what the exact plan was, or that she had a whole thing laid out, and this was just going to be this big grand master plan. But she knew, in this one, it actually talks about how she didn't have any prospects, which is, I guess, I looked at that as no one was coming to marry her.
Well, she couldn't get married, so no one can pursue her because she's engaged technically to Shelah.
Yeah. Oh, right, okay. So, and then with that, she knows that he's traveling, and she's like, well, I have to figure out how I can be protected and be taken care of. And I wonder if she slept with, and I guess a question, if she slept with Judah and did not get pregnant by him, would he still be responsible for taking care of her?
I don't think so. Actually,
I think
is
he supposed to? He has told her that Shelah, once he comes of age, that she will marry him, basically, and he has not followed through. There's nothing to say that he won't, but my inclination is that he wasn't going to follow through with it. So she was, and as we talked about, she was going to be put in this role of widow for the rest of her days, which, just as you said, Moyo, meant, let's take a step back. In the ancient Near East, widows and orphans were those who were supposed to be looked out for the most because they were the weakest, right? They didn't have huge voices to begin with. That's why when you read James and he talks about what religion is, he points to religion to widows and orphans, and why when you read through things and think of even the levirate marriage, that's why it's there, to help take care of widows and orphans. Even when you look at Acts, and I believe when they picked out what a lot of people think of the deacons, it was because the widows and orphans, the widows rather, were not getting their fair share of some of the things that were being divvied up among the church. So she was going to be put in this role. She is put, not was going to be. She is put in this role of being a widow for all of her days, because she doesn't have anybody to look after and care. She doesn't have a son. She doesn't have a husband, which was the means in the ancient Near East for women to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just how it was then.
Yeah.
Right. So
it's interesting. And I had to read this several times to understand whether or not what her goal was at that point. Was it the child itself, or the goal of having to not worry about being, like you said, a widow for the rest of her life and not having anyone to take care of her? And I've definitely settled on the fact that she was afraid that she would have no one to take care of her, because Shelah, the promise, not that it won't be fulfilled, but it's not looking like it's going to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just find it very interesting that she made this the next step of the plan, because it felt like she went from, after us discussing it, she went from more of the innocent, I'm just doing what I'm told, to now, okay, now I'm going after what you told me that I'm going to have.
I'm going to have to act now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, any significance to the? All right, let's just walk through it. He walks by Caesar at Aeneum. I don't know. She's got a veil on, but Judah's like, "Yo, what up with you? what you got going on here?" And she answers, and they work out the price for a goat. Well, he offers a price for a goat, so she doesn't even mention it. Any significance, and I'm probably getting ahead of myself, to the items that she asked for. I think this gets to what you were saying, Moyo, that she was sort of quick on her feet.
Yeah. She's asking for his ID, basically. Yes. Give me your ID. Give me your wallet. Give me everything that I can use to identify you. You can't even doubt that this is your stuff.
Right.
I got your picture.
Right.
So
it's I got you. We're quick now to pull out the video cameras. I got you. You can't say it wasn't you now. So she does that. I don't know. I feel weird asking this question. Do we think Tamar was right or wrong in any of this?
I don't know if it's a right or wrong. I think that if we're looking big picture, obviously there was a reason. But also, she didn't have any other choice. And she's not an Israelite, so she doesn't follow these rules. She can do whatever she want to do. She's not following the God of Israel, who has these rules in place that even his own people are not following. So for her, she's like, my goal is to be married and to have someone to take care of me, like Jasmine has been saying. So if I have to lie my way there or trick my way there, I'm going to do it. I'm not under their law to me, I think that's how she might be saying. I'm not under their law, but this is the family I was given to, and this is the family I'm going to stay in.
But yet again, I'm confused, because this is an example of deception. And that's what the brothers were like. Well, that's what Onan we're assuming was taken away for. So, if she's being deceptive intentionally, her motives are not pure in any way, shape, or form. Why? I want like. Why
it's
is
the
she still
group of
here?
people. She is not an Israelite. We learned in the beginning that she wasn't, right? So she's not falling under that same.
So there's no expectation.
We aren't really told whether she's Israelite or Canaanite. I think most people would think that she's a Canaanite because
that's
of the
where
area
they are.
that they are. Right.
That's how I took it. I'm like, God may have struck them down for they have the law. It's like the whole like Adam and Eve thing, right? Or they don't have the law yet, but they understand that they are being reigned over by God, right?
Yes.
So with Adam and Eve does it, but Adam is the one who gets the blame because he was given the rules, right? He gets the majority, I guess, of the blame. He's the one who's And I think it's the same type of situation. She's not under this. To me, she's not under this
I hear what you're saying. I get that. So the thing I think when we say things like that, we have to be careful. Yes, Israel is God's chosen people, but murder is murder and it's wrong whether you're Israel or not.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, Israel is the apple of God's eye, but lying is lying whether you're in Israel or not. So I wouldn't so much say it's because she's Israel that she didn't suffer the same type of consequences that Onan did. I think it's just people in life and it's gray.
I hate gray.
I do too. You know what I mean? It's just like it's life. Things aren't cut black and white. I was watching something the other day, and I know it's story, but I hate it when they do this. When the bad guy in the story, he's like threatening to do something, and then he tells the person, like, it's 2-3 people. The bad guy, the bad guy is holding and it's like threatening to do some harm to, and the other good guy who's supposed to be, like trying to protect everybody. And the bad guy looks at the good guy as he has the gun in his hand, pointing it to the person that needs to be protected and saying, "This is your fault." It's not the good guy's fault.
Right.
It's not the protagonist's fault. It's still the responsibility is still on the bad guy, but there's just so much gray into what moves people to do things and why things are carried out and how things are carried out, and when people feel like their backs up or against the wall, how they react. Does it mean it's right all the time?
Right.
No, definitely not. I think that she was being a little being deceptive, doing deception. I don't know what the right word is to say right there. But I do think that God is dealing with her in the place that she is. And if we go back to the character of God, who is just, then there is something about this situation that moves him not to react the same way to her that he did to some other deceptions.
That's what I had to come back to that. Like, there's a reason. God has a reason why this specific situation didn't result in the same consequences. And there has to be an ultimate goal that it needs to be fulfilled, and that's why God has not struck her. Because in my mind, wrong versus right depends on vantage point. For some people, now right and wrong is outlined in the Bible with some gray. But depending on your circumstances and what the situation is, some people may say, for example, when people murder, right? Murder is wrong, but when someone kills their attacker, should they suffer the same consequences as someone who kills out of sheer just cold blood?
Or a better situation. I've got your family held hostage. If you don't do what I tell you to do, which is to take out this other person, how are you supposed to be looked at?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. When I say there's a lot of gray, what I don't want to come across is that what's wrong is right and what's right is wrong. People, I was talking to these lawyers once, and I always stand on this thing of truth. And I said, truth is truth. Mm-hmm. Two things can't be true that are opposed to each other in the same circumstance, in the same situation. And they were like, truth is variable and it depends. And I'm like, no, that can't be right. Yeah. So I'm not trying to say that there is not this item of truth or right or wrong or morality, what God has put in place and what should be happening. But what I am trying to say is that while these things are true, that there are circumstances that happen in this world to us as human beings, because this is a fallen place, that I don't want to say get excused, but God deals with them, and the consequences for them are a little different than someone who's just outright behaving a certain way. Because I don't know what you guys think, but I think that Tamar's back was pretty much pushed against the wall. She either had to do something or be relegated to this state for the rest of her life. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And then now, I think as we read on, we'll see the further consequences of what happens here. Yeah. So, I mean, did that make sense?
That makes sense. A lot.
I think it makes sense. I still lean towards her. The rules over her are different. A little different. Me. Yeah, I think I still lean towards that, just because. I think I'll leave it at that. Okay. Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah. It's fine. So she gets the signet, the cord, and the staff. Mm-hmm. So the signet, usually, you all have heard of signet rings?
Yep.
Right?
I haven't.
You haven't? Did you want to explain it?
I can. So they use the signet in order to, it's like your signature, basically. You could use it to sign things, or like just to make note that this, like I'm making a promise to you and I use my signet to stamp my promise. So it'll be unique to you, whatever design or whatever they carve out for you is specific to you. Okay. Right. So the same as a signature.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And usually where I usually see it is like in Rome, and when they would roll up the little parchments and put the little wax there and then stamp their ring in the wax to sort of say, this is from whomever sent it. And the seal hasn't been broken, so it hasn't been tampered with, blah, blah, blah.
Okay. And I think that later on, doesn't Joseph get a signet from
Pharaoh?
I don't know if it was Pharaoh or Potiphar, but I think he gets a signet, and that means that anything he signs, he's signing on behalf of that person. So it's the same amount of authority that his signet now has. So it means a lot to them in that culture.
Yeah, okay. Definitely. And then the cord, people think was just something to put the signet on, because it could be either a ring or a seal, something that you would just take off and stamp or whatever. And then it's staff. And the staff was another identifying item, because staffs weren't all the same. Some people engraved them. Some people put family names on them and things of that nature. So the idea with the staff even is that, just as you mentioned, it's an identification card, basically. Yeah. It's your ID. It's your ID. So she goes to that, gets the staff, and...
Why was he so willing to just hand that stuff over?
It's a good question.
Because I wouldn't give anybody my driver's license to be like, I guess maybe that's a lie. Because when you go to somewhere and they have a tab, you give them your stuff. Mm-hmm. So maybe, I don't know.
I mean, the whole thing is I don't want to say weird, but it is. It's weird. Because one, Judah, you know you shouldn't be doing this, right? Two, Judah, you bring up a price that you can't pay at that point in time.
Yeah.
I'll give you a goat.
And we're at a sheep festival.
Don't have a goat right now, so I'm supposed to trust you to bring it back to me.
Yeah.
Right? So then that's when she's like, well, give me a pledge. And then the whole sequence is just wild. Just the whole way it plays out. And I think that Joseph, again, thinking that this was a prostitute, was
Judah.
Like... I'm gonna go back and mute myself whenever I say
and be Joseph. Like, I meant Joseph,
right?
Judah,
and I'm gonna put up somewhere Judah instead of Joseph. Yeah. But yeah, Judah was thinking that this is just a prostitute. What can she really do?
Yeah, right.
If she has these things, what can she really do to me?
Yeah,
right. Not realizing who it is, because he doesn't know that it's Tamar.
Yeah.
So, and then they go back to look for her. He sends his boy to go back and look.
And
she is gone.
She's gone.
She's gone. I mean, and then did anybody pick up? I think it's in verse 22 or 23. Joseph's response.
Judas' response. He's like, let her keep it.
I need to put money in a jar or something. Judas' response.
Yeah. Let her keep it.
Let her keep it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be embarrassing. First of all, they said there wasn't a prostitute. So this is really crazy. Because who did I sleep with then? And you weren't that concerned because you saw one prostitute. Do prostitutes hang out one at a time, or do they hang out in like
I don't know.
groups?
Right.
I feel like when you see the videos online, it'd be like there'd be a whole bunch of them walking up to the car, pick me. Yeah. I don't know, but I feel like a random one girl sitting out here, and you just like, you must be a prostitute. I'll pick you.
Yeah, I don't know.
And nobody else had a prostitute on y'all trip?
I don't know.
I'm just saying, like, do the boys be out here just being like, yeah, I'm gonna go get me one and you good. I mean, it's only one, so I got her.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I don't know how that worked out.
I think the other thing, if he thought that she was a cult prostitute, why? I mean, I don't know if they had regular non-cult prostitutes, but that then is attaching you to whatever God that she's serving, right? So if you are supposed to be under God and you decided, I'm going to just do this thing with this cult prostitute, does that not signify like a sacrifice to that God? If that's what you thought?
Right.
And is that what he's saying is the like embarrassing thing? Or is it the embarrassing thing that she took my stuff and disappeared?
So it's interesting you bring that up because they use two different words as you go through this passage. One for prostitute, I think, is the word zona. And the other for cult prostitute is like caseta, right? And there's, when I read through the commentaries on this, there was a lot of discussion about was she a cult prostitute, wasn't she? Did Judah, I got it right this time, I almost said Joseph, did Judah recognize her as a cult prostitute or just a regular? And I think what most of the commentaries come away with is that they are using, they are synonymous with each other. They're not meant to indicate cult. Or not, it was just now that Hirah's going back, he's talking to them in their vernacular, so to speak.
Okay.
As opposed to what Judah.
Judah, so, yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point because if she was a cult prostitute, then that has a whole nother set of parameters that go along with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so they go back and find it. But also what's interesting is that he's proud of himself in a sense, right? So you bring up a very good point. The laughing stock. Right? It says if we let everybody know, because now I'm gonna have to go and knock on doors trying to find this woman to say, hey, she took my stuff or she has my stuff, then we're going to be a laughing stock. Everybody's going to be looking at us like, you can't control that. You let all of this get out of hand.
Yeah.
But then the second point, I think, is he's like, look, we tried to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Trying to pat himself on the back.
Yeah.
You took a goat. You couldn't find her. Yeah, let her keep
leave it
it
alone. Yeah, just let it go.
So that's interesting. All right. So now we get to the final portion. Let's read Genesis 24 through 30. You mind reading that?
Yeah. About 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been immoral. Moreover, she is pregnant by immorality. And Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, "By the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant." And she said, "Please identify who these are in the signet and the cord and the staff." Mm-hmm. Then Judah identified them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah." And he did not know her again. When the time of her labor came, there were twins in her womb. And when she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." But as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out. And she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." Therefore his name was Perez. Afterwards his brother came out with the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah.
That's going to cause problems.
This is going to cause problems. So we see the rest of this play out.
Yep.
Just walking through it, right? They have this encounter. Tamar winds up becoming pregnant. When you read it, what stood out to me was the calling out of being immoral.
Yeah.
Right? I get to some extent, because she's supposed to be a widow and not supposed to be engaging in anything outside of that family. But then Judah's response to hearing this. Well, before we get there, where do these people keep coming from that just be like, "Hey, you should go here. Hey, I heard this." It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
But what about Judah's response to hearing about Tamar's pregnancy?
The she's more righteous than I, and since I did not give her to my son Shelah.
Even before that, what does he say should happen to her?
Let her burn. Yeah. I mean, that's the normal punishment, right? Mm-hmm. For someone being immoral or adultery type of thing.
Yeah. So it's interesting, because when you look in Deuteronomy and the penalties for adultery and things like that, they're all usually stoning. So it's interesting in this case that he was like, "Bring her out and let her be burned." I think the only times that burning were called out in like Deuteronomy in the law is if there was some sort of incest, or whether a priest's daughter has committed and had sex, like outside of marriage. Those were the only two times that when I was reading, called for burning. So it's interesting that it's not bring her out and stone her, it's bring her out to have her be burned. Right? But that aside, it's the mere fact that he's like almost on this high horse. Do you think?
I do think. When because initially I was like, "There's no way he could not have known that was his daughter-in-law." There's no in my mind, no way, no possible way. So when I saw this, I was like, okay, so I'm still thinking, well, you knew, and now you're just trying to do the highest of the highest, put her out there, go burn her, so that you can feel like, okay, like, cool, all right, like everything's cool. This doesn't look bad on me. This looks bad on you. You're immoral. Gets rid of her. But until we get down to the next section in verse 23, and he says, she's more righteous than I, and kind of changes the narrative a little bit about, I guess, taking accountability of breaking his promise and identifying that he was intending on breaking his promise. At least that's how I perceived it.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think that he would have known it was her, because why give her all of those things?
Right. So he could be embarrassed.
But I think let's get rid of her is like his happy today. It's like, oh, she messed up. Now I can get rid of her, and I really don't have to keep my promise, and I don't have to worry about her no more. Like, let her die. It's fine. I wasn't planning on doing anything with her anyway.
Yeah. I mean, this is a win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get rid of her. I don't have to worry about Shelah anymore. I'm off the hook.
Yeah.
Right?
It's crazy.
It's crazy until dun dun dun.
Yeah, right.
But Maury Povich's voice, Judah, you are the father.
Yeah.
Right? So we see how getting those items and her keeping them is now sort of benefiting her and pointing out Judah's dismissal of her, basically, right?
Now you're stuck with me.
Yeah, it's and again, just looking at this from her standpoint, it's more vindication for her because Judah was like, "Oh, let's do away with her." And he has a change of heart real quick, really quick.
Yeah, I think when they mentioned that he didn't know her anymore, didn't sleep with her anymore, it kind of goes back to our earlier conversation about sex versus marriage. And I still don't know which way I'm leaning, but she's not married to him just because she has sex with him that one time. But is that why they're saying he no longer, like he didn't do it anymore after that? Because would it be the assumption that if he did, that they were now married?
Yeah. I don't know. Let me know what you all think, but I think it was more of the proof point that Judah was in the wrong. I've done all of this to her to the point where she tricked me and made me stare at my flaws, at my lies, at my disinterest head on. That, yeah, I'm not going to go back to you anymore because you were right and I was wrong. Right?
You know, that's I kind of throughout this I've had this like lingering thought of like a theme of shame avoidance. I don't know if that's a real term, but
sounds real.
Right? Like not trying to bring upon shame or any kind of ill thoughts from outside people or embarrassment into the Judah's family, whether that has to do with his sons and the children carrying on the line, or like people laughing at them and not like bringing that attention to him. And then even here, I think like disassociation with her kind of, even though I feel like he acknowledges because he takes on the responsibility. I think I saw in one of the commentaries that like he doesn't want anything to do with her, but he doesn't want anything to do with her sexually.
Yes.
So, like furthering her sexually, but he does provide for like continues to provide for her because now he has children with her.
Yep.
So disassociating himself with the shame that comes with having sex with a cult prostitute, or that he assumed that she was, and then this being Tamar that you didn't know that she was, just kind of further pushes out the shame that he doesn't want to have to be attached to his name or his family.
Right.
And I like that the whole time I'm like, okay, and I guess that's just life. Like we don't want anything bad associated with us and our family. We want to keep it as good as possible, let everybody see the good things about us. But that's more of where I was leaning as to why he's not having anything to do with her. If he continues to have sex with her, it's just continuing the wrong. I feel like you're just continuing to feed into the wrong.
Okay.
That's how I looked at that.
Yeah. And I think, again, this is one of those areas where even commentaries may not agree on all of the reasons why. But I think it's just the point is that, this was a one-time thing.
Yeah. One and done.
One night stand. No more happened after this, right? Yeah. And Judah was not going to go back and revisit it anymore.
And we get another parallel here with identify these things the same way. Yeah, the same way that they were like, hey, Jacob, is this your son's stuff?
Exactly.
And I like how she sent it. She's like, y'all take that to him and let him identify that stuff.
It's a movie scene.
Yeah.
Let's just take this over to him and let's see if he has a change of heart.
Yeah. And I wonder how they explain that to the people. Do we just gonna gloss over the fact that now everybody knows, because everybody was nosy enough to go, your daughter-in-law did this.
Yeah.
We're not gonna talk about this?
No.
No? Okay.
Again, I think that we see Um, we talked about this, right? How Tamar is sort of voiceless in this, and she gets some voice, but also don't think that there are any real repercussions that Judah would have faced because of this, because of the nature of society at that time, right? What was really going to happen to him. So I think that to the point where he comes back, yeah, I know, but that's how it was. But I think the fact that he comes back and it's like, yes, he's more righteous than me, is giving, a big, I don't want to say shout out, but giving her some of the recognition that she so deserves, saying that, yeah, she's better than I am, right? Yeah. Because I promised something and didn't do it. And even though she went outside of what we thought, what is the norm, not thought, what is the norm, and just as her tactics may not have been completely right compared to me, I don't hold anything against her for that. Yeah. Some commentaries talk to whether this righteousness is him declaring that she's righteous in God's eyes and all of that. And I'm not sure I would go that far. I would just say it's more relational between where he is and where she is at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think these stories play out in my generation all the time. I guess in life, in everybody's generation.
Do tell.
Yeah, when it comes to, because like when you have sex in marriage, outside of marriage, but mostly outside of marriage, and the woman gets pregnant, a lot of times it's like, or if you do like it's a one-time thing, the woman gets pregnant, she's stuck with the child, and like everybody can see, okay, something happened here,
right?
And then the guy can say, oh well, I can wipe my hands, one-time thing. I don't even know her, and move on, and it is what it is. But the shame, like again, the attention, the negative attention is on the woman, and she's like, no, but wait, takes two to tango. You were involved too, and hey, everyone's gonna know when this child is born that this child is yours, Yeah. And it's just interesting how all this stuff makes its way into our lives.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, the time is different. The context is a little different, but there's still some similar things that happen now.
Yeah.
And I would like to think that we, in modern times, are more apt to look at both parties, right? But I know sometimes that it doesn't come out that
way.
Yeah. So we see that. We see the declaration from Judah. But then she has the kids.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anything stick out to you all about these twins that she's having?
I feel like I spent way too much time trying to figure out if it's possible for one twin to stick their hand out and bring it back. Yeah. I looked up way too many things to figure out. And at the end of the day, I was just like, it's God. Anything is possible. But also, I need a doctor. I need a gynecologist. Somebody explain how this can actually happen and if it's possible.
Right.
But I will say that one thing I read said that the twins could both be facing head down.
Okay.
And could possibly like reach a hand out because they could be like this.
Right.
So it could happen. Does it happen often? Probably not.
Maybe not.
Probably this might be the only time, but there's some possibility there.
That's I didn't even think like, hey, is this even possible?
Listen, I've had 2 kids and I'm just like, what? Hand?
Hands coming
and then
out.
there's 2 of y'all trying to squeeze through this hole. Ain't no way. But twins are sometimes smaller too, so you know there's a lot of like, if this and this and this, then yes.
Yeah.
So there's possibility. I just spent a lot of time
looking at it.
A lot of time. I could have been doing geography work, but
I see you now.
At baby stuff.
Looking through AMA journals, like, is this possible? Wait, this may be. No, that's not a case. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Anything stand out to you, Jasmine, about these two?
I immediately thought this is gonna just be an issue.
Okay.
Sibling rivalry kind of thing. I could project. Like I said, I haven't gone too far because I said I was gonna hold off, so I didn't have any guilty knowledge. But I just find it so interesting because the oldest was identified. Who would be the oldest and the first child was identified, but the actual first child that was born is different. But of course, because it has Perez, Zerah has the scarlet thread.
Yep.
We have an indicator. You have to be the first child. The dispute is going to start happening.
It's did he steal the birthright, which we've seen multiple times already, where the second is always becoming the old or stealing the birthright. Exactly. They're not, yeah.
And because that's a big thing, I just see that being such like it's going to like stir things up.
And I wonder why we think that could be possible. Could it be because of Jacob and Esau?
Yeah.
That we think that this is a very similar, even the words when I was reading through it for the intro, like, and she was pregnant and she was with twins. The same thing happens with is stated in the birth of Esau and Jacob when they were wrestling. And we've already talked about it a bit, how important the firstborn is and offspring from the firstborn. And a matter of fact, this may be because it's pointing back to this whole episode that's happened because died, the firstborn.
Exactly.
And now it wasn't handled right to the point of getting another offspring for him by anybody. And then I also think that there are bigger repercussions because, and I don't think this is stealing anyone's thunder, but we know when we go and we look at the lineage in the New Testament, right, who's listed there.
Yeah, Perez. Right? Yep. And Perez is that second kid.
Exactly.
So, I don't know that we find out anything else about these twins besides that lineage thing.
I don't believe we find anything else about them in Genesis.
Okay.
There are some other mentions of Zerah and Perez in, like Kings and stuff where they're retelling history.
Okay.
But it's just, again, I believe, just like a lineage thing, right? That Judah had Zerah and Perez. No, they usually list all of them, right? Judah had and Onan, and and Onan were put to death by God type of thing. And then he had Shelah, and then he had Zerah and Perez.
Yeah.
Right. And then we see that Perez is the one that carries on the line to get us ultimately to Jesus. Right? So one of the big takeaways for me is that even through all of this mess, even through all of this gray, through people we would look at and be like, you're wrong, to people we would look at and be like, you may be wrong, you may not be wrong, but I can understand what you did. But it still comes out in the fact that God is working his plan to get to Jesus, to get him unto us a child is born, a son is given, to get to that point.
Yeah.
Right. So I just think that that's interesting, that in spite of all of this, we end up with those two, and that just continues to show the line that God is using.
And I think, like how I keep saying that, like the theme is like, we meant it for evil, God meant it for good. Like a lot of people would say Tamar is wrong and would consider her acts evil, but God, like, children are seen as like they're the purest, that like we love the children, and God produced children at the end of this. And I would say that was his goal, like where something beautiful came out of this whole situation, something good came out of this entire situation that kind of was rocky, So even whatever Tamar's, with her goal of producing children or having sex with Judah so she could be taken care of, which some people would consider not right, something good came out of that.
Right. And I would say that just to caveat a little bit, I would say that regardless of what people did, God gets his purposes done. Yeah. I wouldn't try and say that everything is good. And I think we're given this story with a lot of gray in it on purpose, right? Because there's some things we can point at to say, oh, this is wrong. Some things that we can point out, like, I can understand why. Some things we can point out, like, oh, yeah, you were right to admit that.
Yeah.
But in and through all of it, God is still getting what he wants to get accomplished.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts? This was a interesting chapter to get.
Yeah, I feel like this episode was super long, but hopefully people hang in there and get to the end.
I was saying we went through a lot of figuring it out, guys.
Yeah, we may have to start chopping these up into two. But the fallback of that would be, well, maybe it's not a fallback. Just have to tune in twice.
Yeah.
No,
right?
Take your time and watch it.
Yeah.
Or
pull out your Bibles with us.
Yeah.
But all right. I think we're going to call it. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being with us. We had a wonderful time. I can't tell you how awesome it is to be here with Moyo and Jasmine. Y'all killing it. But until next time, we get to look at chapter 39.
Yeah.
And I think I titled this one The Thirst Trap.
Oh my God.
Is that right?
I don't know. I haven't even looked at it.
But anyway, whatever it is.
Oh, that makes sense. I get what you're doing.
Okay, see.
I got it.
I got some tricks up my
Tune in
sleeve.
for that thirst trap episode.
But anyway, we will see you all later. Appreciate you tuning in. Deuces.
Bye, everyone.